Crisis in Middle East has affected millions of people across the world. Several countries have been making efforts to restore the peace, and they have been contacting. Turkey is one of them, and today we are lucky to have with us Yusuf Erim, who is an analyst for TRT, Turkey's leading media organization. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So, how does Turkey view this crisis, and what are Turkey's strategic considerations at the moment?
Well, the crisis right now is frankly a huge geopolitical liability for Turkey, and it's a liability on many fronts. Uh, at the end of the day, Turkey does not want to see its neighbor destabilized in any which way. When we look at the objectives of Israel and the United States, well, they have different objectives under the umbrella of regime change. It seems to me that the Israeli objective is not only regime change, it's state collapse or regime collapse, which would lead to some type of Syria or Libya scenario, leading to a very long, drawn out civil war. And in that case, the results of that ensuing civil war will most likely be massive migrant flows, a lot of destabilization. You have a country that has a lot of arms and weapons. When there's voids inside of a country like that, you tend to get newly formed terror groups. You tend to get non-state actors, very powerful non-state actors. And that instability, especially in the Middle East, from what we've seen in the past, if it's any signal of what's going to happen in the future, instability is very communicable in the Middle East. So once it starts, it's very hard to contain, and it can spread beyond borders very, very quickly. So this is the last thing Turkey wants to see. Does it have a great relationship with the Iran regime? No, it doesn't have a great relationship with the Iran regime. But as they say, the devil you know is better than what you don't know. At least it has a manageable relationship. It can work with the regime in many ways. It can also contain the negative aspects of the regime inside of the region as it's gotten used to over the past 1 to 2 decades. So the regime intact, although at a weaker state, is always a better scenario for the Turks than something that's unknown, a new regime, some type of civil war type scenario. So these are all things that Turkey wants to avoid. It's invested a lot in the region over the past 10 years, obviously with the Arab Spring and the post-Arab Spring era. It's invested a lot into Syria, Syria's stability, Syria's future is trying to help rebuild a security structure for Syria. In Iraq as well, it's invested a lot with the new Iraq government. It's trying to fill the voids left by Iran and left by Shia militia in Iraq. It's strengthened its relationship with the Kurdish administration in the north. And then when we look at the Gulf, it looks like we're at the precipice of a new era in the Gulf where Gulf states are finally realizing, saying, you know what? We cannot just outsource our security to the United States. We need regional solutions for regional problems. And inside of that parentheses, there is a huge role for the major regional actors and the major Muslim world actors like Türkiye, Pakistan, quite possibly Egypt, joining forces with Saudi Arabia, maybe Qatar. We may see, and we might finally see this long talked about, but never implemented regional security architecture, at least in the next decade. But we might see the seeds of it first planted right now, but the harvest of it coming next decade. So I think these are the important issues that Turkey is looking at. And of course, also Israel and its hegemonic, this greater Israel position that they have in Tel Aviv. I don't know why they have some type of vision. I think they're completely overreaching and overstretching themselves and also creating many, many hostile actors to themselves in the region while they're trying to reach this. So at the same time, Turkey wants to see those ambitions contained without getting itself into any type of direct kinetic engagement with the Israelis as well. So it's trying to manage that, and it's trying to manage that without that creating more tension also in the Eastern Mediterranean between Turkey and Greece, or Turkey and the Greek Cypriots as well. So as you can see, the puzzle, everything in the region is really interconnected, and the Iran war is not really just the Iran war. It's connected to Gaza. It's connected to the Gulf. It's connected to the Strait of Hormuz, which I haven't even discussed right now. Just the tremendous amount of inflation, the tremendous amount of rise in energy prices that is leading to many, many calculations for every single regional actor. But it's also connected to what could happen in the Eastern Mediterranean as well. So definitely a top priority issue for Turkey.
So, what diplomatic actions or moves Turkey is undertaking to ease the tension in the Middle East?
Well, as you know, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he has a very good relationship with US President Donald Trump, probably one of a handful of leaders in the world who can say he has a good relationship with Donald Trump. Turkey is also a member of NATO, so it uniquely positions Turkey inside of the actors that are trying to facilitate peace as being a NATO member, someone who has a good relationship with Donald Trump. At the same time, the Turks are on a weekly basis talking with the Iranians. But at the same time, they're also mature enough to play a supporting role under the umbrella of Pakistan if the Islamabad talks are going to continue. But they're also ready to host talks by themselves or ready to support any other platform. I mean, at this moment right now, all the Turks want is some way towards peace, and they're ready to support it. And they have the diplomatic connections to be able to help play a very important role. I mean, the Turkish foreign minister and the Iranian foreign minister talk minimum once a week, sometimes two, three times a week. So at the same time, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan's talking with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He's talking with his Pakistani colleagues. They're talking with the Russians. They're talking with the Chinese, the Saudis, the Qataris. So all the major players Turkey has access to and very, very good dialogue to. And in this type of situation where there's no real direct dialogue between Washington and Tehran, you need actors like this carrying this indirect dialogue going forward.
Turkey is the part of two Quad with one Egypt, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia that is mainly focusing, I think, on talks. What does Turkey want to achieve through that Quad?
I don't think it's just what Turkey wants to achieve. I think it's a change in thinking of the Middle East after seeing what's been happening over the past 4 or 5 years. I mean, there was this understanding in the Gulf that the United States would protect Gulf countries in exchange for the petrodollar. After the Bretton Woods in 1974 and the creation of the petrodollar, the Gulf states began to outsource their security to the United States. So there was this understanding that the U.S. would always come and protect me. But now the war in Iran has shown very, very well that the U.S. is A, very outstretched, B, its priority is protecting Israel, not protecting the Gulf, and C, that the Gulf states need alternatives. At the same time, Turkey has its own protection under NATO. But NATO's even being put to question right now. The collective defense clause, the Article 5, is being put to question. The United States may leave NATO. There's going to be a NATO summit in less than 2 months in Ankara, about 400 kilometers away from where I am right now. It could be the very last NATO summit. We don't know. We don't even know if Trump's going to come or not. So there's a lot of question marks regarding these security promises that have shaped the last half century of our region and our geopolitical understanding. So we're seeing a shift now to countries either hedging their bets or slowly beginning to create new security architectures that may rule the next 10, 20, 30 years of the region. And part of that is what many like to identify as a Muslim NATO. I think that's simplifying it by calling a Muslim NATO. I think in a much more real politic and much more logical sense, it's the major regional actors coming together: Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. There's talk that Egypt may be the fourth. There's talk that Qatar may be the fourth. There's talk that just these three countries may go. But there's some type of scenario and there's some type of evidence that there is a coming together of these major regional actors. Now, when we look at Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, they already have a collective defense agreement they've recently signed. When we look at Turkey and Pakistan, they already have a very close relationship with great interoperability between their two militaries. They don't have a collective defense agreement, but the interoperability of their two militaries right now and their cooperation on a defense industry level, you don't need that agreement. That agreement's unwritten already, de facto in place between the Turks and the Pakistanis. I think the key ingredient right now that's missing is that Turkey Saudi Arabia trust between them two to lock in some type of core network of allies to move forward. And I think once we see those steps moving forward, that's when we'll start to see some real talk about a security alliance. But I also want to mention that there needs to be some more maturing of the three actors for this security alliance. Because what's the most important part of a security alliance? The most important part is your air force and your air defense. Now, if you have a security alliance between these four countries, let's say, including Egypt as well, but your air force and your air defense is all American, a non-alliance member, how secure are you? What happens if you get embargoed? What happens if you get sanctioned? What happens if they run out of spare parts or they prioritize someone else? That collective defense agreement falls apart. So it's very important for at least one member inside of the alliance to be able to provide a fifth generation fighter jet and also a anti an air defense shield for this area. It looks like that's going to be Turkey going forward. Turkey has the Khan coming out in the next 1 to 2 years, the Kızılelma, the unmanned fighter jet, and also a wide array of air defenses. It has the Sipar system, the Hisar low altitude A, the Hisar mid altitude O, and the Hisar U, which is the long range altitude. Pakistan has the nuclear umbrella. Saudi Arabia has the financing. Egypt has the manpower. Everyone's bringing something unique to the table that has the main ingredients for a collective defense agreement. But that missing ingredient, as I said, is having the ready-made fifth generation fighter and the anti-air defense system domestically manufactured by one of the alliance members. I think we're 2 or 3 years away from that moment. But again, it looks like we're laying down the groundwork for that future.
So I wanted to ask that Turkey is the member of two Quad, with one Quad comprising Egypt, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, and which is more focused on negotiation with regard to Middle East crisis. And the second comprises of Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. That is more like military pact. So, what is the status of these two pacts? What does Turkey want to achieve with the pact focusing on negotiation?
Well, look, first of all, I think the first question that's always asked is who is this against? I don't think this is against anybody. I think this is the same understanding as NATO. This is an insurance policy. This is an insurance policy knowing that if something major happens in the region, that I have allies I can depend on. So this whole idea that this is against Israel or this is against Iran, no, it's not. It could be against unforeseen challenges coming in the future. We don't know what the region is going to look like in 10 or 20 years. We don't know who the new adversaries can be in the next 10 or 20 years. But yes, right now the focus would be on Iran and Israel containing these two actors, not only containing them, but also being a buffer, not having these two actors attack each other as well. So I think this is very, very important going forward. Now, obviously, by political means and by defensive means, that's a very important phrase because that's one of the first phrases in the NATO charter, trying to solve instability or trying to solve tensions not only by political means but also by military means. But obviously, political means is the preferred outcome. Usually, nobody wants to have a military solution when they can have diplomatic talks to solve the situation. But again, as I stated before, we're still far away from a military alliance. Yes, there's cooperation. There's going to be more increased cooperation. But to truly call it a collective defensive pact, I still think there's going to be about 3 or 5 years, even if an agreement's reached. Just the interoperability. These aren't easy things. Look, Turkey and Pakistan, they both have very advanced militaries. But the other countries inside their militaries, while they're strong, they don't have that interoperability yet. Turkey being inside NATO for almost 80 years, that is a huge benefit to understand working together with other nations. and having that interoperability. It's a very important word that many people discount. But when you start talking about collective defense and that ability to work together, to use radar systems together, to have joint flights together, to have joint ground forces together, these are very, very complex military actions, and that requires a lot of work and a lot of effort to be able to get to that state. So these types of collective defense agreements are a lot tougher than just getting together and signing a piece of paper and saying, "Okay, we're going to do it." But again, as I said, this is something the Turks want. I think the Pakistanis also have a lot of political will behind moving forward with this as well. I think the Saudis want it, but I think there's some question marks in their mind, as I stated. I think the question mark is with the Turks. I think that's going to be solved in the coming period. I think that's going to be solved in the coming period because everything that's happening in the region is pushing these countries together. It's not only these countries want to do this, these countries have to do this. They're being pushed in that direction as well. It's the obvious logical outcome to protect themselves, to protect their people, but also to protect the peace and prosperity of the region and the Muslim world.
So far, this has only been like a sort of discussion between these four countries, especially military pact, or you have witnessed or you have seen any concrete development towards that goal as well.
I don't have any special, I don't have any type of special information regarding this. It's only from what I've witnessed. And I mean, I'm sure you witnessed it as well. There's been multiple meetings right now. So there's a saying where there's smoke, there's fire. So there's obviously some smoke coming from these four, that they're meeting a lot more than they have in the past. So there is something building. But again, as I said, we're still many steps away, but at least they're planting the seeds. And I think that's very, very important because we have not seen this type of political will towards this type of joint cooperation in the past. I think this is very, very new. I think that we're going to see, when we look at diplomacy over the past 10, 15 years, whether it be what's happened with the war in Syria with the Astana Group, whether it be the Organization of Turkic States, these more mini-lateral, smaller blocks that bring together countries that have much more aligned interests. I think that's the new trend in diplomacy, and that's the new trend in alliances. These mini-lateral groups, that's 4 or 5 members, they can move quick, they can take quick decisions, they're much more dynamic. This looks like the new trend rather than the 32 members inside of NATO, the 26, 27 member block of the European Union, where they're so much slower moving forward, trying to get a decision. They're not dynamic. The New World Order requires quick movements to be able to capitalize on opportunities. So I think that in that spirit and in that trend, we're going to see these types of quads, these types of trilaterals, maybe these types of 5-man groups going forward and being very, very successful. And if the day does come where we see this organization get together as a proper bloc or a proper alliance, I think it's going to be very attractive. It's going to be very attractive to countries in the region. I think that a country like either Qatar or Egypt, whichever of the two is outside of the Quad, will want to join immediately. I think a country like Algeria will want to join. I think Syria, if it reaches more stability geographically, will be a very important territory for this 4 countries to have inside of its group as well. So it'll be very attractive. It'll have a lot of applications for membership going forward, and it'll probably be one of the hottest new groups that will be yet to form in the Muslim world.
You made a very interesting point that suggests that perhaps these four countries should be self sufficient in producing and manufacturing weapons so that they might not become the victim of any US embargo. Now the question is, the major weapon suppliers are China, Russia, US, UK, France, Israel to some extent. So does it mean that if these four countries are not capable of producing those weapons themselves, then they would have to rely on China and Russia if they don't want to be dependent on the US and the West?
No, not at all. I shouldn't say these 4 countries, but 2 of them, Turkey and Pakistan, made huge have made up some huge ground in producing with their own domestic manufacturing base. I mean, when you look at the Turks, they're about 2, 3 years away from a 5th generation fighter jet, the Khan. Their air defense system is already being rolled out and taken into Turkish inventory. They they're 1.5 year away from having the unmanned fighter jet, the first operational, real, true unmanned fighter jet in the world, the Kızılelma. On top of that, they already have many drones. Pakistan already has a fighter jet. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. The Turks are moving forward with an ICBM project. Both countries are working on more and more cruise missiles going forward. So they already have a very good industrial base, and that industrial base is moving forward. The only question mark is the two major pieces that are missing. They'll be ready in 2 or 3 years' time. They're just not ready now. They'll be able to support it. And Saudi Arabia also. Saudi Arabia is making tremendous investments. I was just in Riyadh 2 months ago at the World Defense Show, and I saw the type of investments they're making, the type of joint productions they're trying to attract to their country. So Saudi Arabia, 5 years, 10 years from now, is not going to be the same Saudi Arabia of today. They're going to be tremendously advanced. I mean, in 5, 10 years' time, they're going to be 20 years advanced. So I think that they're going to be a real major player in 10 or 20 years. They're going to make up a lot of ground that they had lost in the past 1 or 2 decades, in the next 1 or 2 decades. But I think right now, the locomotive from a defense industry perspective will be Turkey and Pakistan.
You just talked about Syria. That's very interesting because Golan Heights have already been under the control of Israel, and Israel has also been accused of stealing some of the territories of Syria. So, if Syria agrees to become the part of this military pact or whatever forms it takes, don't you think that it would ring alarm bells in Tel Aviv because Syria just borders, Israel?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely going to ring alarm bells in Tel Aviv. Even the heavy influence of the Turks is ringing alarm bells in Tel Aviv. I mean, what happened right after Ahmed al-Shara liberated Syria? The first weeks of Syria,
Mm.
the Israelis bombed any remnants of their air defense and military infrastructure to basically leave the country defenseless. I mean, this was horrible. There was over, I believe, 800 airstrikes launched from Israel to Syria within the first month, and zero retaliation. So Ahmed al-Shara showed that he's not interested in war with Syria. He's not. He has no. He's too busy rebuilding his own country. I mean, his country came out of a 10-year war. Why would he want to go to war with Israel? He may not like Israel, but he doesn't want to go to war with it. He has a lot more high priorities right now, which he has a huge base right now that needs work and employment, tremendous need for infrastructure investments, tremendous need for just foreign direct investment, trying to rebuild the energy infrastructure, trying to rebuild the military. These are tremendous initiatives that he needs to successfully accomplish going forward, not to mention prepare the country for some type of election in the future as well. So while he needs this, the last thing he needs is a neighbor bombing him, a neighbor bombing the infrastructure, a neighbor trying to stoke racial, ethnic, and sectarian tensions inside of the country. So he doesn't want anything to do with Israel. He just has too much. So the Turks right now, they've been investing a lot. It looks like the Americans are interested in investing, as Trump has invited President Shara to the White House before. It looks like the Europeans are also interested in investing. So I think that with these many groups trying to bring Syria back into the fold of the international community and a lot of Gulf investment as well, Syria could be on a very, very good direction if Israel doesn't destabilize it first. So one of the things that the Turks are trying to do is help build the military infrastructure as well to be able to provide security for the whole country. But at the same time, the Israelis view this as a provocation because they don't want to have any type of radar, for example, in Syria. The very simplest example, just a month or two ago, the Turks helped build civilian radar at Damascus airport. And the Israelis went crazy just because of a civilian radar system. Why? Why do they not like this? Because obviously, this has the potential to see Israeli sorties flying across Syrian airspace towards Iran. Obviously, in the future, this may lead to Syria saying, you know what, you can't use my airspace when you want. This is my sovereign airspace, and you need to do just like with every other country, ask for permission to use my airspace. And Israel's just been so used to using Syria's airspace whenever it wants, without asking any type of permission, treating it like some type of colony, that it's gotten used to this. And the last thing it wants to see is a strong sovereign Syria. But a strong sovereign Syria is a huge puzzle, missing puzzle piece to the health and the security of the region.
Can we say that one of the biggest concern of Turkey is that you have Kurds scattered in four countries? Turkey somehow stabilized, Iraqi Kurd now it enjoys comparatively good relations. After the change of government in Syria, it is comfortable to some extent. But in the past, Iranian Kurd have been fierce fighters, attacking senior Iranian officials as well. Mujahideen al-Khalq and other militant groups were also active in the past. So, does Turkey feel that if Iranian regime collapses, it might pave way for dormant Kurdish militancy that used to be there decades ago? It might get revitalized and poses a serious security challenge to Turkey as well, not in the form of attack, but it might rekindle the hopes of the Kurd people, or it might prompt other Kurdish group to wage an armed struggle again. Do you think that this, and Israel being a supporter of a Kurdish state, a sort of, some people even accuse Israel of seeking to balkanize, the region, and it is especially interested in supporting the Kurdish state. And do you think that this is one of the biggest concern if Iranian regime collapses in Iran?
I think if you asked me the same question 10 years ago, I would have said it's a huge concern. I think with the huge advances in the, especially military defense industry, especially with the drones, the surveillance the Turks have, and also diplomatically, the relationship that it has with the KRG, uh, both the Barzanis and the Talibanis, the relationship it has domestically inside right now with its own Kurdish ethnic minority, much, much better. The dissolution and the disbanding and disarmament of the PKK inside of Turkey's borders, some type of makeshift understanding with the YPG in Syria at the moment. I think Turkey is much better positioned now than it was 10 years ago, where it's not a massive concern. I think the bigger concern regarding regime collapse, let me give you an idea. Now, for Turkey, balance in the Middle East is very, very important. Let's take a look at what happened during the Arab Spring. Turkey had a deteriorated relationship with the Emiratis, the Saudis. It had a frozen relationship with the Israelis. There was civil war in Syria, basically civil war in Iraq. So inside of its portfolio of relationships, it did not have any type of normalized relationship with anyone that it could balance the relationship with Iran. So what happened during that period? You saw the creation of the Shiite land bridge. Uh, Iran and Shiite militia proliferated in Iraq. They proliferated in Syria. Hezbollah was at its all-time most powerful in Lebanon. And throughout the Turkish border, from one end, from the Azerbaijani tip of the Turkish border, all the way to the Syrian tip of the border, it had a border with either Iran or Shiite militia of some form. We're talking about almost 2,000 mile or 2,000 kilometer border with Shiite militia Iran. So that was a security concern for Turkey. Now, after after the Arab Spring, Turkey's relationship with Saudi Arabia normalized, the Emiratis normalized, the new administration in Syria. There was normalization with Israel during 2021, 2022, and Iraq normalized, new government there, good relationship with the government. What happened? You saw you saw the Shiite militia lose ground and get defeated in Syria, lose influence in Iraq, and the voids that were created, the voids all began to close because Turkey's relationships with the other countries balanced Iran. It balanced it naturally, like naturally inside the Middle East when these relationships are there, naturally these voids close. Uh, Everyone talks about how October 7th is a big turning point in our recent 5 year history. October 6th was such a beautiful day for the Middle East. Yes, were there problems? Of course, there were problems. But when we look at the Middle East, many of the countries were coming together inside of the Middle East. There weren't too many voids inside of the Middle East. The Turkey Saudi relationship was very good. Turkey had some type of working relationship with Israel. It wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't terrible. They had some understanding. Syria was coming up and up. The relationship with Iran was manageable. There wasn't Shia militia everywhere. The governments were slowly reestablishing their sovereignty. And again, under these types of circumstances, the region can normalize. It has this internal reaction to fill these voids. But when these relationships destabilize and there's not these natural checks and balances, somebody becomes hegemonic. So what happened now with the last 1 year with Iran, with after losing Syria, their control in Syria, and then getting bombed in the 12-day war, and now you're seeing Israel out of control. You're seeing Israel in the Golan Heights and expanding even further. You're seeing Israel trying to commit a genocide in Gaza. You're seeing Israel most likely moving to annex land in southern Lebanon. So once these natural balances are distorted, one of the players starts to have these types of hegemonic ambitions, and they start acting out on these ambitions. So that's why it's very important for Turkey to see this balance, because it doesn't need to handle everything directly. It can very indirectly solve these issues by ensuring there is a natural balance in the region.
You talked about Saudi investment in defense. Does it mean to make Saudi Arabia self-sufficient, or it is investing to buy more weapons, maybe from Lockheed Martin or British Aeronautical Engineering? And what about Qatar? Do you think that Qatar is also making moves to become self-sufficient in producing weapons?
I think everybody's making moves to become self-sufficient right now because everyone sees what's happening and everyone understands that you have to decrease your dependency on foreign powers because you don't know what's going to happen. Even look, even a country like Israel right now, it's running out of interceptors. If we see massive Iran swarm attacks in the upcoming weeks or months, Israel's going to be vulnerable despite having its Iron Dome, despite having the United States behind it. There's only so much this new modern warfare doctrine allows the other side to be able to withstand because it's now quantity over quality. It doesn't matter if you have fads. It doesn't matter if you have Pac 2s or Pac 3s. It doesn't matter the quality of your interceptors. If the other side sends 50,000, 10,000, 20,000 drones, very cheap drones, sooner or later, the law of averages, you're going to have these saturation attacks start piercing, start destroying your air defense, start destroying your runways, start destroying your critical infrastructure, and then you, it's very very hard to be able to maintain the proper infrastructure to be able to deliver the expected and necessary services to your citizens and also provide that necessary architecture for your security services.
So you made an interesting point that if Syria also joins, it's going to ring alarm bell in Tel Aviv. What about both Syria and Egypt do that with, even if that is symbolic, nuclear umbrella of Pakistan and Turkish military power, the umbrella of Turkish military power. How would Israel react in your view if Egypt also happened to join this military pact comprising Turkey, Pakistan, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia?
Well, first thing, the one rule about a military pact is you don't ask non-member countries for permission on who's going to join and who's not going to join. I think that once the Pakistanis and the Turks are together with Saudi Arabia and they have the understanding with the nuclear weapons and the just the sheer force of the Turkish conventional power, it doesn't really matter what Israel wants or what Israel doesn't want. Israel can't deal with these two countries together. I mean, you're talking about 800, 900, a million person standing army between the two. You're talking about nuclear arms. You're talking about fifth generation and fourth generation air forces. You're talking about tremendous drone army that's whether it be swarms or whether it be mid-range to large-range drones that can fly missions 24 hours in the air with standoff weaponry. Uh, that's a lot of. I mean, look, I think people really over-exaggerate the military power of Israel. At the end of the day, it's a country of 9 million people. Okay, it's 9 million people at the end of the day. It's a small country. There's only so many critical targets. I think even the Israelis over exaggerate their own power. They haven't faced any type of real force. I mean, they face a non-state actor in Hamas. They're facing a non-state actor in Hezbollah. They've bombed a non-state actor in the Houthis. I mean, the only real country that they face is Iran, and it was all indirect bombing each other.
So,
That's not the type of war. That's not the type of war the Pakistanis and the Turks would fight. You would have a very serious conventional army pushing forward on the ground with air support, with nuclear support, with deterrence. That's a whole nother league that Israel's never faced, and hopefully it never will have to face. I mean, I don't even like talking about this stuff because then it turns very, very escalatory. People start cutting up these little clips and saying, "Oh, they're threatening." We're not threatening anybody. We just want to make sure nobody's threatening us, and if they do that, we have the proper relationships in place and the proper deterrence in place, so that their threats are just empty threats.
do you think that Turkey could face any pressure from NATO if it really goes ahead with this? With this military pact comprising Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey, do you think it could face any pressure from the US or from NATO or from
Well, I
Europe?
think Well, I think the first question is what's the future of NATO? So I think we're going to find out the answer to that question in 2 months. What's the future of NATO? Is there even going to be a NATO? What happens if the Americans leave NATO? Will Europe plus Canada and the Turks want to continue forward, or will they say, well, you know what, Americans left, we can't do this, let's dissolve? Or maybe Europe might want their own European army. Maybe the Turks might want to go a different direction. Maybe they might say, you know what, okay, we'll continue 31 countries rather than 32 countries without the United States. Or the Americans might be bluffing. I mean, this isn't the first time Trump has increased tensions ahead of a NATO summit. Last year at the NATO summit, before the NATO summit, he had very negative comments going in. And then what happened? You got the 5% spending promise. In the first term of US President Donald Trump, he had very negative comments regarding NATO. What did he get? He got a recommitment to 2% GDP for defensive spending. So this could just be a tactic as well. I mean, his historical behavior shows that this was just a tactic, but it could be very serious. So we don't know. Now, if NATO stays intact, will this be a problem? Well, inside of NATO, I believe inside of the charter, and don't quote me on this, that inside of the charter, there's obviously some type of bylaws that restrict countries from joining other types of defensive alliances. But at the end of the day, there's paperwork and workarounds. What Turkey can do is exactly what the United States does, having bilateral collective defense agreements with Pakistan, with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, one by one inside of that alliance, rather than doing it alliance-wide. And there is a precedent for this with the United States and Saudi Arabia, and the United States and Qatar, and the United States and Bahrain. So there is a precedent for it. It might not be an alliance. It might not be directly inside of the alliance, but it'll have bilateral collective defense agreements with each one of the actors in the alliance. So there's paperwork tricks that can be handled going forward if all the actors are very serious regarding moving forward. And at the end of the day, I mean, if NATO is not giving the security or leaving question marks in the minds of its member states, I don't think anyone really cares if the Turks are going to be part of a second alliance somewhere else, as long as they're meeting their requirements and their commitments to NATO.
My last question is that there is a widely held perception that Israel has got quite hegemonic, and there are certain far right elements, or some people might go to the extent of calling racist elements inside the Israeli government, who are seeking the establishment of Greater Israel. So, if this dream of military pact does get translated into a reality, do you think that it could act as a deterrent against the possible Israeli aggression against any country of the region, or
Yeah,
deter it from seeking Greater Israel?
well, I think this military pact would be a huge deterrent to any actor in the region, not just Israel, to Iran as well, or any future actor. You're talking about a lot of serious firepower when you bring these three, four, five countries together. They really complete each other with their missing links that an alliance would solve. And this type of allies coming together would solve. But I mean, at the end of the day, look, I obviously there's this hegemonic Greater Israel project, but again, when you look at the capabilities and capacity of Israel, I mean, I hear this a lot of talk that Israel's the new regional power. Israel hasn't even been able to display expeditionary capabilities. I mean, it's been what, 3 years now, and it hasn't been able to achieve anything in Gaza. It hasn't been able to achieve anything in southern Lebanon. I mean, bombing countries into an oblivion and creating uninhabitable zones is not military power. Okay, you can destroy things. A lot of countries can destroy things. The Turks can destroy things. The Pakistanis can destroy things. So can the Egyptians, especially when you're dealing with a non-state actor that doesn't have air defense. That doesn't mean a lot. That doesn't mean a lot, especially when the new adversary has these capabilities as well. So I mean, we've never seen the Israelis face off against anyone with a real air force, or anyone with a real air defense system, or anyone with some type of complex electronic warfare systems, or any one that has a massive drone program. The Israelis have never faced off against countries like this. So the Israeli military, yes, okay, they have nuclear weapons, but right now, when we look at the world and the 8 to 9 nuclear powers, how many ever there is, uh, I don't think any nuclear power will allow a nuclear power to use nuclear weapons, because, I mean, the understanding since 1945 has been that nuclear weapons are a deterrence. And it's that understanding as a deterrence that has somewhat kept the peace and somewhat kept us from killing each other and ending humanity. Now, if countries break that taboo and start using this weapon, which was once identified as a deterrence, now as an offensive weapon, or as a uh, game ender or a game changer, well, that changes everyone's calculus now. That change, everyone needs to change their military doctrines. Now everyone moves to a first strike doctrine rather than a retaliation strike doctrine inside of their nuclear understanding. So that makes the world a tremendously dangerous place, and uh, that's probably not the type of world that either you and I or any of our kids, our family, or our friends wants to live in.
Sorry, this should be my last question as you talked about that. How does Turkey view Iran's policy of propping up, proxies for decades now, for years now, or rather decade? And does Turkey want, or does Turkey think that it's okay for Iran to have nuclear weapons? And the third perception is, the third part of this question is that now many regional countries view Iran as one of the toughest enemies or a threat to the region peace. Turkey shares that view. Do you think that Iran is also a threat to the regional countries?
Look, a lot of people say Iran is winning the war. Look, let's be honest. Iran's quite devastated right now. But but they're closer to their stated objectives than Israel and US are closer to their stated objectives. So from that perspective, okay, Iran is winning the war. But Iran's capabilities are very, very degraded right now. So, I mean, in the classic sense of Iran's winning the war, no, it's not winning the war. But strategically, or at least Iran is closer to its objectives right now. Now, as for having nuclear weapons, I don't think any country wants its neighbor to have nuclear weapons. So Turkey, no, Turkey does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons. I don't think anyone in the region wants Iran to have nuclear weapons. No one in the region wants Israel to have nuclear weapons, you know? But I mean, obviously, steps need to be taken. So, in that aspect, yes, I support the United States. I don't think Iran should have nuclear weapons, but at the same time, I think Israel should be denuclearized as well, because the sheer fact that Israel has nuclear weapons, and that since it has nuclear weapons in this relationship with the United States, that it can partake in these wars of aggression without anyone truly pushing back against it, creates a national security risk for every country in the region. So I understand. Even though I don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons, I understand why they're moving forward and why they want to have nuclear weapons at the end of the day. And to answer your proxy question, I think, I mean, I'm not a fan of non-state actors. I'm not a fan of non-state actors anywhere. Some of them maybe I have more sympathy towards because of their geopolitical or ideological positions. but at the same time, I think non-state actors really complicate the geopolitical chessboard and really complicate for sovereign states on how to truly deal with them, because you're dealing with segments of societies rather than state actors. So I don't think it's a good thing. I think they create a lot of problems. I think they create a lot of instability inside of countries going forward. And I mean, when you look at Hezbollah, I mean, you can make arguments for Hezbollah. You can make arguments against Hezbollah. You can say, well, Hezbollah was created as a resistance to Israeli attacks. Okay. But at the same time, it's also the pretense why Israel is attacking. But at the same time, you can say, well, Israel was attacking Lebanon before Hezbollah was there. So it'll probably attack it after Hezbollah is there. True again. You can call Hamas a non state actor, but you can say, well, you know what? If there was a two-state solution, maybe Hamas would be a state actor. It may be the government. So that's another argument as well. Again, as I said, these types of non-state actors really complicate the geopolitical chessboard. But at the same time, I understand that in some cases they are necessary as well. Turkey has had its fair share of problems with non-state actors. It's had some positive results with some non-state actors as well. So, I mean, there's no single answer to that. I mean, it changes on a case. It's a case-based situation on how non-state actors are. In my opinion and your opinion may